Hey guys, welcome back to another weekly update. This is a pretty big one, both in terms of how much I got done, and also we hit another milestone. So I'll actually start us off with the milestone here. I'm going to be ready for the first wave of testing. That is going to be a performance-based test, so mostly it's just going to be making sure that things like the menus work for everybody, rebinding keys and everything, and also, a little bit of a check on movement and simple things like that. But the big thing that I'm after is seeing performance metrics on different PCs. So that's going to be the main focus of this. And unfortunately, it's not going to be very refined in terms of gameplay. So we'll kind of build that out as we go. Right now, I'm focused on just getting the game to run well on multiple different setups, because right now the only setup that I know that it runs on is mine, and mine is quite a bit more powerful than a lot of other people's. Not to brag or anything, but it is what it is, and it's really important to get multiple systems in for testing. So if you are interested in getting in on that, then just join the official Maledictor Discord page. And I'll leave a link to the Discord channel in this video description. So just jump in there and let me know that you're interested in testing. So I'll talk more about that in the actual Discord group. But for now, let's get into what I got done this week. First off, episode menu. Right now, there's only one episode. There's going to be 3, so there's space for the other 2, but for now, I've only got the first episode in. Mostly just because I have to kind of custom make the menu. Otherwise, I would leave in a little placeholder, but I have to custom make the buttons. So I'm just going to leave that for now until I know the name of the episode. Next up, we've got a difficulty menu. Right now, it's only one difficulty, so that is going to be kind of non-functional for a while. I'm not exactly sure when I will add in the difficulty options. It would probably be better to get it in sooner rather than later, but for now, I don't really have it in yet. I need to kind of figure out a system for that. I think I have one, but really, for the most part, it's just holding off on that just for now. After all, I just got finished with the menus. But next one, we can start a new game from the main menu and the pause menu. So you can actually use the menu to start a game. In fact, before, the only way to start a game was to already have a game started. So now you can actually go in and start a new game from the main menu. And then you can start a new game once you've started a new game. Trimming graphics options. So I went back into the graphics options and was trying out the different settings now that I have the menu for it, and found that some didn't really make any difference, and some made way too much of a performance difference for basically no visual quality increase. So I just kind of trimmed the choices there a little bit. Adjustments to E1M1, that's quite a bit of a facelift I gave it. I basically added in some visual updates, and that's really kind of it, but there is another big thing that changed specifically in E1M1, but it actually applies to the rest of the game, and that is adjustments to the lights. So, found that there was some issues going on with the lights where there kind of shouldn't have been. And it turned out that some of the lights were getting counted twice in terms of it. The engine will count how many lights are in a certain area, and if you have too many, then it will disable casting shadows on them past a certain point. And so if you have lights being counted twice, that really starts to limit what you can do. And I would imagine it's probably not great in terms of a performance efficiency standpoint either. So, got that fixed up. We got an FOV slider now, so you can change your FOV. For now, it goes between 75 and 110, and I don't really see any reason to increase that in either direction anymore. 75 for me is way too close, and 110 for me is way too wide. So I tried to get it to kind of extremes so that we could make sure that everybody has a comfortable FOV, because that'll change depending on what your screen is like. But another thing that I had to change was adjust the weapon to the FOV. So, and basically, you know how if you change your FOV in a game, then you'll wind up seeing either more or less of the weapon model because of how that changes the camera. Well, that also happens here, and what would happen is as you would increase your FOV, it would actually push the weapon model further out. So you would see way too much of it, and you'd see the cutoff of it. And so I wound up figuring out an offset that will automatically apply as you change the FOV, so it will push the weapon flipbook closer to the screen or farther away, depending on your FOV. So now that works just fine. And before, that was actually the limiter for the FOV slider. It used to be limited to 90 until it figured out how to create the offset. So that's a nice little thing to figure out. We got a sound settings menu and sound settings. So now you can change sound individually between, of course, you have a master sound that you can change, but you also have sound effects, music, which we don't have any music right now, but that should hopefully change soon. And then we've got ambient sound. So right now, those are the three main ones. I don't know if I'm going to have player sound once we have a voice for our character, Clayton, but for now, 3 menus I think is enough. Next up, we have got a menu system redo. So I had to go in and change the menu system, just how it works. And the reason for that is because menus are kind of weird in Unreal. Menus aren't really something that you delete. Most of the time in Unreal, if, say, you have an enemy and then you kill them, so you're done with them, you more or less just leave them the same. So you could destroy them and just get them out of there, but you do things like turn off their AI and turn off a bunch of their settings so that they're just sitting there. But if you had something like a weapon shell case, so you shoot and a pistol shell comes out of your pistol, hits the ground, and then after a couple of seconds you just have it delete. You don't really do that with menus. And so menus, I originally had them to where you would create a menu that was of a certain class. So you would create a pause menu class menu, click on like the settings button, and then it would create a settings class menu on top of that, and it would try to destroy the pause menu. So that worked fine when I just had it to where you would hit the escape button and it would close all the pause menus. And you would just go right back to the game. But that stopped working when I decided to make it to where you would hit escape to go back to the previous menu that you were in. And I found the problem was that those menus, you might have tried to destroy them, done what the most equivalent thing would be of destroying a menu. You do that, but it still exists. It's just not visible anymore. And so it can still run and accept code. It would mean that the pause menu I had set up to where you would hit escape and it would take you out of the menu and put you back to the game. The problem was that if you have that still running and it's always listening for you hitting the escape key, if you are in other menus, you hit escape to go back, then the game will suddenly resume and you will have menus stuck on your screen that just will not go away. So I had to redo the system for that and make them all permanent menus that get hidden and then detect if they are visible to the player to accept code or not. So that system works significantly better now. It was just a little bit of work to figure out, and it was a little bit of work to implement it, but now the menu system works significantly better, and it is way more versatile now. So it feels way nicer to use. So really glad that I got that done. And we've got a key rebinds menu, and we're going to talk about the key rebinds. We're actually going into the editor for this one because it's not what you think. Specifically, keybinds themselves. We'll get into that one. We got it done though. So then we got mouse sensitivity, and then finished all the menus, which is what I was really waiting for testing. So now, like I said before, we can actually get into testing. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into the editor, and I will show you some things about key rebinds. Welcome back to the Unreal Editor. It's been a little bit, and down there you can see our new and improved E1M1, but we're not here for boring things like level design. We are here for exciting things like keybind menus. So as you can see, we have got our menu here. This column here is completely functionless. It's just for the player to know what each key is. So technically not functionless, but from a coding standpoint, functionless. Here we've got our slider, and then we've got our keys. And this is actually a specific box called an input key selector. And what that is it's essentially what it sounds like. It is a box that exists specifically for key rebinds. So we have here, you see how it says W. If we just click on this one, go down, it says W because we have no key specified text. This is essentially saying if no key has been bound or rebound specifically, then just display this. So we have that set to our default bindings. But if we go into the graph here, you see the function that this has. So you would essentially click on W. It would change to a, if we scroll down again, it will say ... So it switches to that. And then you press a key, and then it will switch to that key. And functionally, it passes through the key that you pressed. And this looks pretty simple because we just made our own functions here. So we are feeding the selected key into our set keys function that we've made. Then we are also feeding make literal name. And this is basically the actual function that we are rebinding. So this is so that the game knows what function we're rebinding, because it doesn't really look at what key is currently there. It's looking at what the function is. So we're feeding that in so that it knows what key it's rebinding. And then we are also feeding in our slot, which is this input forward. This is an object reference. Specifically, it is a let's see if we here. It is a, I can get it to you. We'll just go into the function here. You can see that is an input key selector object reference. And so essentially what that is it is saying which of all these slots we are changing. So it's telling it specifically, we have input forward as the name of the slot. And we are feeding through input forward to tell we are rebinding the input forward slot. Now, the game knows that, but what we need to do is we need to save that location for later. So if we go into our set key function here, where we have our key, our function, and our slot being fed through, you can see this mess. It really just looks like a mess because we've got a little bit of transparency here. But anyway, first what we are doing is we are removing the key that is already bound to that slot, and then we are adding the new one. Then we are going in, getting our keybind array. So our keybind array is essentially just our it's a list. Think of arrays as lists. So we've got our list of keybinds, and then we're doing a for each loop here. So this is getting every entry in the list, and we are checking for if there already exists an entry for the function that we're rebinding. So essentially that would say, do we already have a saved rebind for this function? If we do, then we are removing that index. So we're removing that from the list. The reason why we want to do that is because if we don't, then we're going to wind up with multiple binds for one key. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is that we don't have a way of displaying that. Now, if I went in and I did something like I added another selector, then that would be perfectly fine, and we would be able to find multiple keys. The problem is that right now, if you had multiple keybinds for one function, then you wouldn't be able to see that. So maybe later on, I'll add in more functionality to where we can have, like 2 keys for one function. I make use of that sometimes, usually during speed running, but sometimes you never know. So we are removing already existing binds from the list, specifically ones that are for this function that we're rebinding. And then when we are done deleting them, we are going to get the object name of our input key selector, and we're going to add that, the key, and the function name in as an entry to the list. And really what that is, we're not adding all those individually. We have what's called a structure. So I believe I went over structures last time, maybe when I was talking about the save system. But if we go into our save game system here, and we have keybinds, I bring this over. So this is just storing. This is creating one entry that stores the key name, the key, and the slot. So we are adding a unique keybind list, or entry to the list anyway, and then we are saving it. So that's pretty simple. The problem here is not actually with the functionality, because you can get it to save the function of rebinding a key very easily, and then it will work, and you can restore that functionality on a relaunch of the game. So it's not hard to actually rebind a key. What is kind of hard, though, is getting this to not display the default binding. Is it's not actually showing the binding. It is just showing what I specifically entered here as a default no key specified text. What the big problem here is that I could get the game to save the functionality of rebinding a key. If you rebound this to J, then your first time doing this. So if you were rebinding the key, you would click on this, it would switch to ... you'd hit J, and then this would change to J. And then you would press J to go forward. But then when you closed the game and relaunched it, you would still be able to press J to go forward, but in the menu, this would go back to showing W because there's nothing setting it. The big problem here is that you need to have your players know what key is for what action. Even if they've rebound it, they should know. It's still pretty bad practice to show a completely different key than what's bound. And after quite a bit of testing, I found that the issue here is that I was originally just saving the input key selector object reference, because that is exactly what you need. So we were saving that, as you can see, just passing it through, no problem. And what I started running into was that it would not change this letter. And why not? I'll save you the hours of troubleshooting it took, but I found out that Unreal, there's some things that Unreal just does not like to save. And one of those things is apparently input key selector object references. The dumb thing is that it will save other object references, not this one though. So the challenge then became, how do you keep the slot saved with your function and your key? Because you need to know which slot this goes to. And so I found out that you're able to save strings. You can save strings, no problem. And what a string is, as you see here, get object name. You are just getting the name of the object, and it is putting the name of the object in there. Now, that sounds kind of weird. Like, you can't save the object reference, which would just really be the slot a reference to the slot, but you can save the name of the slot that you are trying to save. And the problem is that you can't really just convert this so easily. So you can have the name of the slot that this goes to, but Unreal kind of needs the specific slot. It needs the reference. So then what? Well, what you can do, we go into startup here, and well, let's actually go into the actual solution here, I guess. What I came up with, and I'm sure there's some way to automate this if you are more experienced, but I'm not. So what we do here is we make an array at the very start of the game. So we go here, and then as soon as this launches, we're doing our set arrays function, which is what this is. So we are setting two lists. The first, as you can see, we are getting every single box, every object reference for each box. Then we are getting the display name, and we are putting that into a list. And then we are making another list of the input references, and we are putting them into the same spot in that list. So the first entry in this list for the strings is the same object as it is here. So we are essentially creating a conversion here. And then we are going into the startup function, which runs right after that. We are getting every entry in our keybind array. We are removing the already existing default key, and then we are adding our old keybind. We're adding the custom keybind in place of that. And then what we are doing is we are getting the string. We are finding a entry that exists in our strings list. So let's say this was the forward input. So this would be event graph. So what this would be is like input forward, for instance. This would be the string that says input forward. And then we are finding what spot in our string list says input forward. We are getting what spot in the list that is. Then we are getting our object reference list, and then saying, so if it found this on like spot 5, then we would go, okay, so get the 5th entry on this list, and then set that slot, set the displayed key to the key that's bound in the saved data. And then it will actually show it correctly. So that's one of those things where getting the keys to rebind took me about an hour. Getting it to show the player what key was bound took me about 5. It's just one of those weird little things that you run into where saving this to a file and then loading it out, it works 99% of the time. But if you find the 1% of the time where it doesn't work, you need to figure out how to fix it. So, fortunately, we got that done and it works just fine. I would show you, but I'd have to do a kind of longer launch into the game, because if I just launched it through the viewport and I tried to open up the menu, opening up the menu is escape. And escape is also how you automatically close simulating the game through the viewport. So you have to do a longer launch system. So just take my word for it that it works. And that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Make sure, if you're interested in testing, that you join the Maledictor Discord. And, make sure that you follow us on Twitter as well for more frequent updates. And with that, I will see you guys next week. Thanks a lot, everybody.